Okay, I've managed to stave off frostbite. It's below 32 out here. If you hear people talk about why photographers are nuts, this is it. It's freezing cold out here, but it's so beautiful. Look at that light. And because of the pandemic, we let the grass go to seed this year to reseed itself. So we've got all these really cool stalks out here. So I wanted to come photograph this in the light before the morning light got too harsh. It's really beautiful out here. Okay, so back to this. So what I want you to see is, so I'm still in my aperture priority setting, and I've set this on, I've opened this all the way up to 3.5, and you see this is blinking. That's because this lens, this shutter speed with this f-stop is not right. And it can't go any faster than that for this camera, so it's blinking to tell me it's not going to get the right exposure. So as I adjust my f-stop, it's still not happy. Okay, now it's giving me the correct exposure. So before, when I was shooting, it wasn't the correct exposure. Now it's happy. It's still giving me a question mark because it's trying to tell me something, and I don't know what, because I normally ignore it. But now the exposure's not blinking anymore. So now when I take this shot, you see that the camera thinks it's the right exposure. Now remember, I also had overexposed this earlier, or underexposed it, sorry. This would be overexposing it. And I gotta tell you, sometimes if you have something that's really dark, this is when this works. You have something that's really dark and you want everything else around it to kind of blow out a little bit, and I don't have anything here. It works, and it makes a kind of interesting shot. Okay, so let's get back to, I'm just gonna leave it at the default. I still think the sky up here is overexposed, so I would want to compensate, but I want to go back to talking about this. So as I adjust my f-stop, the camera is readjusting my shutter speed. And so f14 at 1/1000th of a second is the exact same exposure as f16 at 1/800th of a second. And you see that's how that's happening. As the aperture gets smaller, you can kind of see my reflecting hand here. As the aperture gets smaller, the shutter speed gets longer, and it ends up creating the proper exposure based on the meter readings that the camera has. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do is I want to switch this over to shutter priority mode. And you're going to see when I do the scroll wheel now, what I'm adjusting is the shutter speed. And it's not happy. So at this shutter speed, this is the the smallest aperture that my camera will let me go. It doesn't do an aperture smaller than 22. So now I'm not going to get the correct exposure, and that's why it's blinking. Okay, still doesn't like that. Still don't like that. Well, all right, so with my camera, I'm going to go back in, and what it's doing is it's giving me the shutter I was set on an aperture. Nope. Okay, it normally does. I don't know why it didn't do that. Maybe I have to do it in manual. Sometimes you can adjust that. Manual. Tell it what you want the... Nope. I don't know why it's being... I normally don't shoot shutter priority, but normally if I tell it I want to shoot that, but what it's telling me essentially is, oh, it will go to 8 seconds. Okay, so those are seconds. Okay, so no matter, mine will go to 30 seconds before I have to go to bulb. It just doesn't like, no matter what I do, it doesn't like anything. So let me do this. come up here at the sky. There we go. And so now, look at that beautiful sky. Beautiful. That's the nice thing about winters. You get these clear skies. It's like that beautiful cerulean blue. So you get these clear skies. And so now it's told me what the proper exposure is. And if I don't like it, I can again control my exposure. It's a balance. It's a balancing act. And the way to fix this, right? So if I get the proper exposure down here on my trees, the sky's overblown. If I get the proper exposure on my sky, the trees are underexposed. Okay? There are things you can do to fix this, and we will talk about those in subsequent videos. But for now, I just wanted to show you how that worked. Okay, now manual, go to manual. This, by the way, is auto. The camera determines everything. And those are some preset programs. Okay, so manual. It is going with the last f-stop I set and adjusting my shutter speed. So I go to the aperture priority, set my aperture. Okay, so aperture, set my aperture, and then I flip over to manual and then control my shutter speed. And I'm controlling it. You see, no matter what I do, that shutter speed on manual, it's not letting me, it's not adjusting this. This is purely manual, 100% manual. The settings I've set on the camera are the exposure I get from what I shot, which is overexposed. So you see that it didn't give me a good preview. Okay. So in controlling, now with setting my, so let's set the, you want to, for my ISO, let's go with f22. And then we're going to do a long exposure. Okay. And so now I'm going to come in here and change my ISO. There it is. I was wondering where it was because I know to look for a number. Okay. So I'm going to change my ISO to 6400. Click this to get out. And when I take this photo, well, that was way too overexposed. So what I have to do is we're not low enough light for this. Let's get out of the sky. Let's look in the shadows at least. Wrong way. Go this way. Let's see what that does. It's still overexposed. But here's the good news. Oops, let's go in there. So I know it's overexposed, but when I zoom in on this, let's find something that's not. You can see I don't have horrible film grain. Okay, and that was how I was able to use a high ISO without destroying my film grain. I know it's an overexposed shot, but let's do this. At some point I'm going to start to get some grain, but I'll at least get a properly exposed shot. There we go. Okay, so when I zoom in here, I didn't blow out my shot with the high ISO. And that's how you avoid grain. Now, Lighting here is the sun's come up, it's around 9 o'clock. So we're no longer what is considered really low lighting anymore. So I will do this with some night shots in the future, and we will take a look at that. Okay, I'm going to end this here and stop freezing myself for today.